So we hear all the time about this event, that Jesus died and 3 days later rose. And we also hear about, a couple days before this event, where Jesus was sitting at a table with his 12 apostles, and he said, "Take and eat, this is my body, this is my blood, which is given for you." He initiates and establishes the Eucharist, which we believe to be the body and blood of Jesus. But a lot of times those things that happened 2,000 years ago are difficult for us to believe today. I remember studying abroad while I was in college, and we spent some time in Italy, and I got to drive on the way to Rome. We took a train and we took a detour on the way to Rome to a small town called Lanciano, Italy. This is a small coastal town, and there is it's not a very big town, but there's a very, very big story there. See, the church there, back in the 8th century, back in the 700s, there was a Basilian monk, a priest, who was doubting the faith, who was doubting the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. And so what did he do? He was in the middle of Mass and saying, as he was obliged to do, to say at Mass every day. And at the moment of consecration, where the priest bows down and said, "This is my body," and then he elevates the host. "This is my blood," and he elevates the chalice. And believe at that moment as Catholics, that bread and that wine cease to become those two things and become the body and blood of Jesus. And see, usually the accidents, what we see, just remains what appears to be bread, what appears to be wine. But at this moment in the 700s, that was different. It changed into the actual body, and it changed into body, flesh, real flesh, that actually looked and felt and appeared to be flesh, and real blood. Actually, the chalice solidified, the wine inside solidified into coagules, 5 globs basically of blood. And for centuries, the church recognized this as a Eucharistic miracle, a moment where Jesus not only changed the real presence of what that bread and wine was, changing the body and blood, but also the accidents, what it appeared to be, to confirm the faith of this priest and of the whole church. And for centuries, this was honored and revered. And we were in this church in Lanciano, and I was able to look at the miracle, to see, 12 centuries later, that same host see the flesh still, to see right underneath the same 5 coagular globs of blood that have been preserved by just weathering the elements. There hasn't been anything that's kept them from being deteriorated, except for this miracle. For years, for hundreds of years, it still remained flesh, it still remained blood. And so, back in the 70s, Pope Paul VI said, "You know what, I want to have some scientific, precise investigations and experiments going on." And he allowed for 2 very prominent Italian scientists to actually study what this miracle was. And this is what he came to the conclusion of, these scientists. The flesh is real flesh. The blood is real blood. The flesh and the blood belong to a human. Not only that, but the flesh consists of the muscular tissue that lines the heart. And that not only that, but the flesh and blood have the same blood type, AB, which, by the way, if you know anything about the Shroud of Turin, which is the shroud that covered Jesus as he was buried, the same blood type is found on that as well. The preservation of that flesh and blood, which was left in their natural state for 1,200 years and exposed to the elements also remains a natural phenomenon. So what does that mean for us? It means that God works miracles not only in his time, but in our time as well, to confirm in faith in us, not to do a magic trick, but to tell us, I am real, I exist, and my heart beats for you. So never forget that every time you go to Mass, that you see the priest raise up the host, you raise up the chalice, you are in the presence of Christ, a God who loves you and gave his life for you, and rose 3 days later to share that divine life with you. And not only that, but says, "I never want to leave you," so he leaves us his Eucharist. Miracles happen. They happened 2,000 years ago, and they happen today.